Hey, good morning, everybody. This is Amanda Waters, Carlsbad High School, with my big buddy Ira over here, looking all snazzy.
Ira Childress, Gulliver Prep, Miami. We have a very special guest today, someone that's an experienced administrator, a good friend of mine, and a mentor of mine. Someone when I started out early in my career was always there and very helpful, and one of the top administrators to me in the country. And we're very, very pleased to welcome Glenn Terry of the NCAA. He's one of the administrators at the NCAA Eligibility Center. And Glenn's going to come on and share a few words with us this afternoon and take a few questions. So Glenn, first of all, welcome. And next, if you would talk about a little bit about yourself and the Eligibility Center and what you guys do there.
Absolutely. Ira, thank you for having me. Amanda, good afternoon, and good afternoon, everyone. My name is Glenn Terry. I'm with the NCAA Eligibility Center. I am the Director of Outreach and Strategic Partnerships. What we do is we're responsible for seeing to it that all 8 million high school student athletes that want to compete in Division I and Division II in the NCAA know what they need to know about the academic and the amateur requirements needed to compete. There are academic standards that they have to meet from their freshman year through their senior year, along with test scores and a GPA that they must achieve to be able to receive that scholarship, practice, and compete at the Division I or Division II level.
Glenn, can you talk about, before we get into the specific questions, but just, with the whole COVID-19, can you kind of talk about that situation and how it's impacted obviously all of us and high school students throughout the country, and also your office?
Thank you. Sure. COVID-19 actually caused the NCAA National Office to go to a remote working environment March 13th. So we've all been working from home, still trying to do the work of college administrators across the country and servicing our colleges and universities, as well as the high school community and the students and parents that want to know what they need to know as they transition their students from high school to college. COVID-19 has really taken the educational side to a virtual environment, to an e-learning environment. So we've had to adjust some of our certification requirements and really take some things and look at some things to make sure that student athletes are still able to meet the academic requirements and still be able to transition from high school to the university of their choice. The SAT and the ACT canceling their exams also took its toll on student athletes who required those tests to meet the academic requirements, not only for their scholarships and for initial eligibility, but for admission to colleges and universities across the country. So we've all had to kind of look at things, and what the NCAA has done is we partnered with our membership, our colleges and universities and our committees and governance structure to try to be student athlete friendly in these times and make sure that we come up with a standard that is reachable and student athlete friendly in this environment.
Glenn, thank you. What advice would you give to student athletes right now who are going through this unprecedented time?
The first thing I would say is do the best in the classes that you have. You guys are in an e-learning environment. Continue to do well in those classes. Continue to study hard, get the best grades possible, because just because that they're in an e-learning environment doesn't mean that these aren't going on your transcript. This is the way that you pave your way, A, to admission into the college or university of your choice, but B, to that potential scholarship that you're trying to get. Academic achievement creates opportunity. So do the best that you can in your academics, and it'll increase the opportunities that you may have.
Okay, one other thing that I had, can you talk about the new rules with the COVID-19 and how would they impact the 2020 class and also the 2021 class?
Sure. The COVID-19 rules are really just we've come up with what we call the COVID-19 auto waiver. Basically what's going to happen, and I'm going to try to separate it from a Division I and a Division II perspective. For Division I, we are still going to try to certify student athletes under the 16 core courses, 10 core courses at the start of the 7th semester, with 7 being in English, math, or science, at least a minimum core GPA of 2.3 and an SAT or ACT score that matches their core GPA. If we cannot, we're going to look at what we're calling the COVID-19 auto waiver. And the COVID-19 auto waiver is, if we can't certify a student athlete under our normal circumstances, under our normal academic requirements, we're going to look at the 7th semester and see and measure the student athlete to see if they at least had 10 core courses by the start of the 7th semester, with 7 being in English, math, or science, and at least a 2.3 in those core courses. We did not attach a requirement to the SAT or the ACT, basically because we realized that some student athletes weren't able to take the SAT or the ACT, or they were able to take the SAT or the ACT, but needed to retake it again to try to get a higher score, and weren't able to because of the cancellations that the SAT and the ACT.
Go ahead, Amanda.
I need Mark to mute himself. I will go in and mute him too. Sorry, Glenn.
That's okay. With Division II, what we're going to do is we're still going to try to certify student athletes under the 16 core with a 2.2 GPA and the sliding scale with the SAT and the ACT score. If they're not able to be certified under our normal means and with all of the criteria, we're going to utilize the COVID-19 Division II auto waiver, where they must at least have 10 core courses by the start of the 7th semester with at least a 2.2 core GPA. We also realized that some schools are going to a pass-fail environment. Many schools and districts across the country will be just giving pass grades or pass-fail grades. With those pass grades, instead of applying the lowest passing grade of D, we're actually going to give each student a 2.3 value for those grades that they receive a pass in. Now, if that 2.3 lowers their overall core GPA, we will just apply the courses that have letter grades and give them the credit for those courses that they have received a pass in. If it raises their core GPA, we will utilize the 2.3 value for those core courses.
Thank you.
Hey,
Amanda?
Glenn, question for you on ours. What do you see as long-term effects? What challenges do you see? I mean, I know, Dr. Fauci came out this morning again saying he doesn't know if, sports are going to be happening. I know it's stressful for everybody, the seniors, the juniors, all the athletes, obviously. We have a lot of kids that only really go to school for athletics. And as much as people want to say that, maybe that's not true, it's totally true. So, what is your thought on that? What do you see as long-term effects?
Well, I look at things from a two-pronged approach. These student athletes need an education, and education is the key to their future. The higher the education, we know the more the earning potential. So I want them to get the best education possible. I want them to get, to do everything they can to get that degree. We're going to look at this, we're looking at it right now from a 2020 perspective. For those student athletes that graduate in 2021, 2022, and 2023, we're still going to utilize the pass-fail environment for those courses given when they're ready for final academic certification. As far as moving forward into this next academic year and if we'll hold classes or what that will look like, we're still in the process of talking about all of that. I think all of that is up in the air as we know that this is an ever-changing environment. And what we thought was just going to be, you know, you're home for 2 weeks or 3 weeks or 4 weeks, for some is now turned in, I think this is week 7 for me. So we're now looking at, you know, what's the next piece, and from a collegiate perspective, we have students that are graduating and looking to enroll full time in the fall, and you have those colleges that are saying, well, we're trying to determine if we are going to hold classes virtually or if we are going to allow students on the campus. So I think a lot of our colleges and universities are going to dictate what the new environment is going to look like. And we're going to do everything that we can to not only support our colleges and universities, the student athletes that are incoming and that are already collegiate student athletes, but our high school environment with the high school counselors and athletic directors and these high school student athletes and their parents as they try to negotiate this vast environment.
Have they started any type of collaboration with people to kind of come up with ideas for safety, right? So let's say football. Let's just take football. That's the big one everybody has a question about, especially money-wise, right? NCAA, high schools, everybody. And looking at safety standards for football to allow it to begin, maybe clear face masks or hand washing stations on the sidelines, or is there any type of talk, I'm sure there is, but about how that would look, even if they allowed them to play, what safety standards they would have to follow?
They've started talk. I guarantee you there are talks. I have not been privy to those talks, I'll be honest with you, but I know that those talks are happening, and I think the main thing that we want to do is ensure the safety of not only student athletes, but all students across campus. You know, we're looking at students that are going to be living in dormitories and eating in dining halls and sitting in lecture halls that, you know, that seat somewhere between 200, 300, and depending on the size of the university, somewhere around 500 students. So, you know, when you think about that, and you also think about putting student athletes in a contact sport like football or a sport like soccer or volleyball, you really have to really gauge everything, you know, as far as the campus environment as well as the student athlete environment to make sure that these students are safe all around and not just when they're practicing or competing.
Right.
That makes sense. Glenn, and just real quick, anyone who has any eligibility related questions, please feel free to put them in the chat and we can ask Glenn while we have a few more minutes. But Glenn, you know, what advice would you give us as athletic directors in terms of working with our student athletes, going through this, you know, from an eligibility standpoint? And, you know, as we, you know, right now we're in 2020, but as we know, this could be carrying into 2021 as well. So what advice would you give us for the next year, you know, in terms of being athletic directors, of how to work with our student athletes from an eligibility standpoint through this process?
Well, there are a couple different things. Great question. First thing I would say is, as an athletic director, those freshmen and sophomores that aren't registered, we have a profile page that we allow that is a free of charge account for student athletes to utilize. And at that point, we're sending them information about academics. We're sending them information about time management and study skills and different things like that to ensure that they're receiving timely information, not only as we go through this COVID-19 phase, but throughout their high school career until they decide that they want to register with the Eligibility Center. That's one way that we can continue to get information, and each one can teach one. The second thing that I would say is, as athletic directors, and even if you have school counselors that are listening in, this is a great time, especially as we go into the summer season for those underclassmen to get ahead on their classwork. If there are classes that they can take in an e-learning environment and try to get ahead, or if there are classes that they did not do well in and have the opportunity to repeat. This provides an excellent time for them to increase their grade point average and really do well in the academics. As I continue to say, academics, the academic achievement really creates the opportunities. And, as a former coach, when I was looking at two sprinters and if they ran the same time and had similar characteristics, the one that I recruited a little bit harder was the one with the higher GPA, because I didn't have to chase them around to go to class. So the better that they do academically, the more opportunities they're going to create.
Good. Amanda?
Yeah, so a couple questions. Roni Efford asked, what are the requirements for Division III? And what could you touch on that just a little bit?
Sure. The Eligibility Center doesn't have Division III requirements. We don't certify student athletes, Division III student athletes, because they don't have athletic scholarship dollars. So the only scholarship dollars that Division III student athletes have are either need-based dollars or academic dollars tied to their academic achievement. So the one thing that I would say about Division III student athletes, they will be eligible as long as they meet the conditions for admission at that respective Division III college or university.
You're muted, Amanda.
Yep, sorry. And then the second one, do you feel like the NCAA Clearinghouse will look at testing scores in the sliding scale for the graduating class of 21 if ACT and SATs are not offered in the fall?
That's a great question. Right now, given the environment that we're in, we are going to look at test scores. We are going to look at GPAs. We are going to look at the entirety of a student athlete's record, unless there are conditions that come about. And we are in the process of continually talking about those conditions, but we don't want to preemptively strike when we don't know what's going to happen in the coming weeks and months. So right now, as we look at the class of 21, 22, and 23, those student athletes will be required to meet the full academic requirements of Division I and Division II.
The last question that I see, so spring athletes obviously were given a 5th year, right? An extra year or a year to redo their last year. I'm sure the conversations about how that affects recruiting and budgets, and obviously I don't know how that works with money going in for freshmen and because you're going to keep their 5th. What do you know about that, and what could you touch on that with us?
I can touch a little bit on that. I know that they've been given their 5th year. I know that they've given universities they've been liberal about extending scholarships for those, not only those continuing student athletes that are on campus, but those incoming student athletes, to make sure that they are able to honor scholarships for incoming student athletes, along with those student athletes that are remaining to continue their eligibility.
Glenn, last question. From an eligibility center standpoint, what are some of the key things that you guys, I know you touched on it a little bit earlier, but if you can go over it one more time, just some of the key things that you guys that we should be telling our student athletes, or our guidance counselor should be telling our student athletes to do right now, especially the 2021 class, if they haven't done it.
2021 class, the first thing I would say is if you have classes that you need to repeat, or classes that you need to improve a grade, the summer provides a great environment to do so. If you took Algebra 1 and didn't do well, you got a D, but you wanted to, you have the time and the ability to repeat that class now, to raise that grade. This is the perfect time to do so. If you haven't registered with the Eligibility Center, please do so. Go to www.eligibilitycenter.org and register. If you are an underclassman, if you're a sophomore or freshman and you're really not certain that you want to compete in Division I or Division II, but you know that you're interested in college athletics, gone ahead and register for a profile page. You can go to eligibilitycenter.org and register for a profile page. It's free. It provides you great information, not only about academics and athletics, about nutrition and time management and injury prevention. It provides you a great wealth of information about what's going on with our college student athletes and what they're dealing with day to day in their daily schedule. So we're trying to give you a taste prior to getting on a college campus of what the college day would be like for you.
Amanda, you have anything else?
No, Glenn, I can't thank you enough for joining us. I know that all of you guys are putting in so much hard work to kind of make this happen and planning and at least the 57,000 scenarios that could happen from this. And I think as ADs, that's kind of the situation that we're in, is we're going to try to do our best with the situation, obviously, that we're given, being as positive as we can. I really appreciate you taking the time to help answer a lot of those questions. And I just really appreciate it, Glenn.
Well, we thank you. You know, we know you guys are right on the front lines with our student athletes and really helping to educate and develop the next generation of NCAA student athletes. So we thank you. We know that these are trying times, and we stand with you to partner. And if there's anything that we can do, I have no problem being a resource. So please don't hesitate to reach out. I'm more than happy to give my email address and pass you along to members of our team, whether they are in your region or just to answer a question. So if that is okay, I'm more than happy to give my email address.
Go ahead, Glenn.
My email address is T as in Tom, ERRY @ncaa.org. Terry, GTERRY @ncaa.org. And my name is Glenn Terry. Look forward to talking with you again. Thank you for all that you guys do, and we're looking to partner with you to help your student athletes achieve that dream of participating in the sport that they love while pursuing a degree at one of our colleges and universities.
Real quick, I'm gonna embarrass Glenn really quickly before he leaves. NCAA administrator, he's a big shot, but he's also a Big Ten hurdle champion and one of the amazing hurdler. So
long time ago, retired, long time ago. So I thank you so much.
Yeah, take care, Glenn.
All right, thank you. Have a great one.
Yeah. Amanda, you want to jump into the agenda?
Sure. Okay. So one of the first things on our agenda is fundraising. And I know that we're talking about that a little bit. Ira, you and I, how people can fundraise. It's hard, I think, because, you know, we don't want to look like we're using this to make money and do all of those things. However, I think the reality is if we're going to have any type of athletics next year, we're going to have to fundraise, and it's going to have to be by sport or by booster club or by team or foundation or however each school will do that. Ira, what's your suggestions and thoughts on the fundraising piece?
Yeah, it's a two-pronged approach. Obviously, now is not the time to go out mass fundraising. We're in a pandemic, so I mean, I wouldn't do that right now in general. But as we move further and further to potentially having a fall, potentially, you know, I know some people rely on fundraising. I would be more targeted, and what I mean by that is there are certain businesses that are doing really well right now. So you want to think about those if you're thinking about some corporate opportunities. You know, there you know, certain businesses during this time that really picked up. So think about targeted fundraising in that aspect. Also think about we've received, you know, I've received several calls, and I'm sure you guys have too, from alums and people that are in the community that want to help student athletes during this time. You know, so think about that of how it may not help individual student athletes, but they still maybe say, you know what, we want to help the track team, or we want to help the football team, or we want to help the baseball team. So if you have alums and people who are reaching out saying they want to help during this time, that can be an opportunity as well, because, you know, we are in a pandemic, but our student athletes and coaches, you know, still need some help sometimes, and they need, you know, resources, you know, so I would think about those two things, in terms of fundraising. I would not go out in the middle of a pandemic and try to mass fundraise. That would be frowned upon. But if you have people reaching out to you wanting to help, be strategic about that. And the second piece is, if there's some corporate businesses that are doing well, even during this time, that would be something to look at there. Because I know from a financial standpoint, everybody's going to take a hit, from a school wise, and the one thing you want to think about is, you want to try to do everything you can, and sometimes it's not possible, and I understand that, but you want to try to do everything you can to, cut in areas where, we're going to talk about that in a minute. I mean, I'm guessing, Amanda, as far as the, budgets and stuff like that, but you want to try everything you can to do without cutting people. You want to programs, different things, professional development opportunities may not be what they were, but you don't want to cut people. And I know at some point, all of us may be asked to thin down a little bit, because this time has really, really hit us pretty hard. So that's something you want to think about. And you can always use the fundraising piece in that end.
And I think Michael Gross put something on here too. Restaurant fundraisers is a great one. I know that our band just reached out and sent something, a local pizza place that's, been around forever. They're struggling. And so they partnered with our band, which is one of our biggest programs. And so people are getting to-go food from this pizza place. And the pizza place is made, make your own pizzas and stuff, which they can be fun if you have little kids. And so that's another way to kind of help the community, help your local community, as well as funding some of your program. But I think as athletic directors, we have to be very strategic. Like, we don't want to have multiple people going to the same places. So I think, you really need to reach out to your coaches and say, okay, here's some plans for some fundraisers. Restaurant nights is probably a really good one, but we don't want everybody to have the same one. So let me know what restaurant you're going to reach out to, so that I can put in maybe a Google sheet and share with those coaches, so that multiple people aren't going to the same spots. Christina Hunt explains, she's in a private school, so they do fundraising, live auctions, always go over well. Businesses, people like to donate, different things. Obviously that would be when school reopens, unless you did a virtual type thing. But I know right now, at least here, they don't want us delivering anything to homes, so even delivering that type of thing would be tough. Ira, any other thoughts on fundraising?
I think that's it. I think we just have to be smart about it right now and strategic, with the fundraising efforts. And as we move later into these calls, we'll have an expert on and talk about fundraising. We can get a little bit more deeper into it. But for right now, I think those are the big things. And then, what are we going to go? What's the next thing on the agenda? Because I want to talk about kind of looking ahead.
Virtual tryouts.
Who?
Virtual tryouts is next.
Yeah, I'll let you lead. Go ahead.
Okay, so I don't know if any of you have done this yet. We did cheer last week, and it actually went really well. It was done via Zoom. The panel showed at the top, kind of like if you're looking at the screen now, and they let in one person at a time. They had a time specifically that each cheerleader was supposed to try out. They were sent a video in advance of the dance, of the cheer, of the different things they had to do. And then it was a live video. So they did a live video, and the judges were all on a Google Sheet and scored people accordingly. And then at the end, they leveled everybody JV varsity, and that's how they picked their teams. I will caution on a couple things, issues that came up after the first time of doing it. One, some people obviously have technical difficulties, can't get on the internet. It's a challenge for them. So another option would be for them to actually submit their video via email, right? They can video themselves and submit their video via email. I would also suggest flexibility. If someone has a struggle, parents working, can't, and again, this is such unprecedented times. Normally we're not super flexible with tryouts, but I would recommend at least a good week leeway to allow some of those that couldn't get on that day to still come in and send the video in. I wouldn't suggest setting up another Zoom, but at least giving them opportunity. But the virtual tryout, one, it was great for me and great for the kids, because they were smiling and laughing, and they're wearing their Carlsbad stuff and the Lancer Way, and it was really nice to see kids in a happy situation, which was nice. But I don't know if anybody else has tried virtual tryouts or what your thoughts are, but Ira, what do you think there?
No, I think it can be really good. Again, just assuming that everybody has technology, to work through it and make sure that piece of it is set. But I think it also gives kids something to look forward to. With everything that's been bad, I just from a pandemic standpoint. So I think it could be a good thing from a morale standpoint as well. It gives our student athletes something to look forward to. And if it's something if it's something that you normally do as well during this time, I think that could be good as well. So connecting virtually right now with the student athletes, I think is very important.
Well, and I know it says Jason Snyder and Jake Jackson both said that their district said no to virtual cheer tryouts. I honestly would, I would have them I would try to do what I could to have them reconsider that, just because I can tell you 160 cheerleaders tried out. That's 160 smiles, 160 kids that I know mentally are in a much better place than they were yesterday because they got that opportunity. And I know it's not perfect. But I think, and again, a tryout, someone said not mandatory, but it's not really it's a tryout. Like if you want to try out, great. If you don't, that's okay. But it's, the stuff that they did was very basic, but at least you could see what they can do. So, if they allow you to do that, I would say, again, don't go Ira and Amanda said to your district. But I'd be more than happy to, be an advocate for you to help with that. Because we did not have concerns with liability because it's done in their homes. So it was pretty basic stuff, but it was good. So that's all I got for virtual.
Great. What's the next thing, Amanda?
Ideas for sport returns. So with social distancing by sport, I can tell you that yesterday we had a great meeting with some North County Conference ADs in the San Diego section about how this would work. And obviously there's people that we consider experts in the field of each sport. We have our football guys that we know are, the leaders in our football community, and golf and tennis and cross country and whatever your fall sports are. I would suggest that you get with your core group of people, regardless of whether it's with your district or with your conference or your section, however that works for your state, and start working on some of these things. I know that, not a lot of people are doing that. Everybody's kind of waiting to kind of see what happens. But I really think that, like I said, the last meeting we had, we have to come up with plans. You have to have plans in place. And again, they have to be fluid. Obviously, we don't know when it's going to happen and when we're going to be back. I do believe we'll be back. I get that all these reports are coming out that we may not play. I'm a glass half full person, and I do believe we'll play. But I do think that we have to make sure the safety standards are there and that we've prepped and planned for that. So, I could give you ideas based on sports, some of the things that we came up with yesterday, but we're going to be, getting back together next week to go over what all of these, the leaders in these fields have said on what they could do and couldn't do regarding to social distancing and sanitization and all of those things. So I don't know how far you want me to go in that, Ira, or what.
No, I think you're right on. The big thing is I think we all need to be proactive. We met with our state association yesterday as a group of ADs in this area, and we were just throwing out ideas and working through ideas, because we all feel like in the fall that we may be back in some form. We don't know what form, but maybe it's halftime, in class, maybe it's other halftime remote or whatever, but we haven't figured that piece out. But we expect to be back in the fall in some form. So why not be proactive and come up with 4 or 5 different scenarios that could play out for our student athletes? If we're back in this form, this is what we would do. If we were back in this form, this is what we would do. If we talked about yesterday potentially, moving the seasons, I mean, that could be something that could go, hey, you know what, maybe some of the, non-contact sports maybe go in the fall, maybe some of the other, sports go later. Obviously, none of this is official, but we're just having dialogue of different things we could do to try to make this work. Some people feel in 2021, by early 2021, there'll be a vaccine. Now, if there's a vaccine, that's the only thing that can really kind of get us back to some semblance of normal. So if that's the case, maybe we move football to the spring. We were just thinking about a lot of different things down here in terms of, how to make this work. The one thing everybody was on the same page about was we wanted to try to get sports in. We didn't want our student athletes in schools to try to have to go another year. Obviously, they didn't go the whole year this year, but they went the last spring without sports, but to not have that happen again. So there maybe you move back start dates, till October and then get going. And, the other thought was, maybe we have shortened seasons. So maybe sports, instead of basketball playing a 25-game schedule, maybe the schedule's down to 15 games or only league games or whatever. I mean, so there's just lots of ideas. And again, no one's holding anyone to these ideas, but just thoughts of trying to get this in. And we'll throw the question out here, Amanda. What are some of the thoughts on this call? Does anybody have any thoughts around, trying to come up with different plans to get this 2020 and 2021 school year athletic season going?
I think the biggest thing, Ira, that I see is, not so much dates, right? Like we know, okay, if it comes back August 1st, let's say that everything settles down and we start on time. Let's just say that is happening. Best case scenario, right? What does it look like? Because it's still not going to look the same. So what are you going to do? And what are your, I have to tell you, yesterday was one of the toughest calls I've had. I had to call my football coach and explain to him and ask him, do you realize we have no budget? You realize that you can't get the stuff you normally get. You realize that we may not have fans. We may require you to wash your hands on the sidelines and the players when they come off to wash their hands before they go to the sideline, or clear face masks on the football helmet so that there's no exchange of fluids on the field, or people that have no skin showing, where they have to have the sleeves and the leg covers. And, what does that look like? And I'll be honest with you, he actually gave me the best answer I could imagine. Is he said, we just want to play. Whatever you put in place, whatever North County and San Diego and anybody puts in place, he goes, we just want to play. Obviously they don't want to wait till spring, because then it would affect next fall, because then what do? Do you keep, you know what I mean? With injuries and all of that, that's not a lot of time for recovery. But, he said, he goes, I don't care if I have a 2-month season or a month season, only play league. I want to play. So for me, my biggest thing is, okay, what type of plan can we make to make that happen? What type of stuff can we buy and cleaner can we buy? I would suggest, if we're going to have football, you lay out everything in your locker and you disinfect and spray like you would for a staph infection daily, right? And then of course it's, how do you do that with custodial, and how do you get the cleaning supplies? But you have to kind of be creative. For us, we have a bus budget. And obviously next year, I don't think we'll use buses because of the social distancing, right? So I'm going to ask that our district allow us to use our bus budget for officials and for the cleaning supplies, for our athletic training supplies that we'll need to be able to have our seasons. But I mean, that's just some suggestions for some of those sports. And, obviously we could go into much more detail. I'll know more next Tuesday. So hopefully I can go into a little detail for everybody by sport.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
at least to get the ball rolling on starting to think, get together with the people you trust, be the leaders in your groups, and say, okay, hey, if we're returning, what does that look like? How does cross country social distance? How does boys water polo make sure that it's safety and standard? And yeah, they're in chlorine, but they're still on the pool deck. And how do they warm up? Maybe there's a longer gap between games. So there's a lot to think about and a lot to plan, but I would rather have a plan in place, Ira, than just kind of go, fly off and just try to figure it out at the time. I don't think that's a success for anybody.
Yeah, I don't think that's a success. And I would throw out plan A. And that plan A is meaning that everything is going to be normal, everything's going to be like it was, because it's not going to be. I mean, that is, unless there's a miracle vaccine in the next month or two, which I don't anticipate, and no one anticipates that happening. So it's not going to be normal. So throw that plan out and start operating from the new normal plan of, hey, what can we do? Talk about that. We normally travel lots of places around the state, out of state, all over the place. We're not going to do that. You know what I mean? I mean, the plan is that if things, we're going to be local. We're going to be playing local. So when you think about your budgets, that could really help your budgets. You know, that could be money that you could maybe use and use elsewhere that you know that, hey, you know, we're not going to be doing the heavy traveling that we normally do. We might not go to some of the big tournaments that we normally go to. You know, so I would start thinking along those lines to really set yourselves up for opportunities, you know, to do other things with the money that you have. So think about that and when you think about restructuring, because it's not going to be business as usual.
Well, and there's some good questions too. Charles Senate reached out, you know, individual state associations, are they giving us guidance? You know, honestly, in California, our state association will decide whether or not they're going to do state playoffs, but they're not going to tell districts what they can and can't do with athletics. What they're going to say is, what plans do you have in place? And to be honest, most of our districts are so concerned right now with online learning and trying to get the teachers ready and the classes ready. As ADs, this is when we really have to step up and say, okay, here's what our group did, here's what we're going to plan. And I'll be more than happy to share what we come up with next week with everybody in the group, just so that you can kind of see what we started and the planning that we've started. I know Lisa asked too for sharing. A lot of people are going to be silent, and that's really what I'm
pull
seeing.
it up.
What'd you say? What'd you say, Ira?
If somebody has some questions, we can pull them up and let them talk. I mean, if you want to.
Okay. Well, and the biggest point everybody's saying is everybody silent? You know, most of their state associations are silent because they don't know what to say or do right now, just like we don't. So I would suggest any suggestions you have, get together with the people that you know and start coming up with, if we start on time, this is what it's going to look like. If we don't start on time, talk to your coaches about what does an adjusted season look like for you? What does, you know, an extended season where we don't start and we start, you know, fall in November, what does that look like for you? And start having those conversations. Gary actually has a question. I'm going to let Gary chime in here. Gary Stevens from Thornton Academy. If you could unmute yourself.
How are you doing?
Hey, Gary, how are you?
I'm hanging in there.
All right, so you were talking about preparing for the worst case scenario and those things. What's your thoughts on all of this?
Well, I had a conversation yesterday with Jay Hammis of Safe Sports Zone, and some of you folks may know Jay, and he and I I work with Jay some on Safe Sports Zone, one of his team members, and we were talking about that worst case scenario of you know, first of all, what's going to happen in what would be a COVID-19 game. And we were talking about like extreme scenarios, like number one, you have no fans, or you have socially distanced fans, and maybe schools are going to have to take a look at doing what the grocery stores are doing now. I know my supermarket is very organized. They let a few people at a time. You have socially distanced lines. You have stop signs pasted in the aisles. You have arrows. And I'm just asking this rhetorically, are we going to have to do things like that? We're going to have certain sections where only family members who live together can sit together. Otherwise, we're going to have to create social distancing, which creates a lot of work, a lot of logistics, and a lot of supervision and management, which will be challenging. How are we going to manage in a COVID-19 environment? How are we going to manage teams or schools, fans coming into games? Again, are we going to have socially distanced spaces to let people in? Are we going to have other ways to let them in? Are we going to have to offer PPE to our workers, our ticket people, our security, or other people, ushers? Are they going to have some type of mask or something to protect themselves? And the other thing that Jay and I were talking about, and we're just exploring these ideas, how are we going to know that coaches, athletes, and officials are safe to be out there? How do we manage that risk? And again, ask the question, are we going to have to test student athletes regularly, daily, which would be the extreme, and coaches to make sure that they are safe to be out there? Those are just questions, but that's the extreme. That's the worst case scenario. So I think anything south of that is good, but I think we have to be prepared to ask ourselves, could we operate in a COVID-19 environment? The question I've asked myself all along is, not as a former soccer and basketball coach, is I don't know how to play defense unless I'm in somebody's face. That's sort of what I taught when I was coaching. how do you play defense if there's not some form of clearance, not just personally, but obviously culturally as well, that it's okay to do so. So I say prepare for the worst and hope for the best. But I would be thinking about these extremes in my planning. Just
Agree.
my thoughts.
Yeah, thanks,
Thanks.
Gary. I appreciate that.
And,
You know, it's funny, Ira.
go ahead.
It's
No, I was
funny.
just gonna say,
Go ahead.
I was just gonna say we don't wanna wait for. I know somebody mentioned that, waiting for the government and waiting for, different, the state associations, from down here, and I've heard with other state associations, they want input and feedback from us. And as far as waiting for the government may give you some general, guidelines and things of that nature. It's like, hey, you can going back to school, or you can go back to school, or we're going to open up the state, but they're not going to drill down to the point of your athletic program and your school and, and stuff like that, what you do there most of the time. So the idea here is for us to be proactive and bring ideas and thoughts to these people, especially our state associations, and things of that nature. Go ahead, Amanda.
So Jared brought up a thing too, some scenarios about campuses going between 20%, they're talking about coming back slowly to school. And it was interesting because I had the CIF assistant commissioner on our meeting yesterday in California. And he agrees with me that if schools go back at all, then athletics could start. And it's how can that start? It's planning and making sure that you can start if they give you the okay to start. So I think being prepared is extremely important. Can you hear me, Ira?
Yep, go ahead.
Okay, good. I know that a bunch of things, California just announced that, they're going to have schools available in July, but that doesn't mean it's going to be fully back in July, right? That means, what is it going to look like? So, the biggest questions that I see on all of this is planning, and Ira and I will do our best to get you as much information as we can. And as ADs, every single person on this call right now, it obviously is a leader in our field, right? We all want to make a change. We all want to make a difference. So you have to plan. And people want to know what to do. And it's even simple questions like reaching out to those positive coaches that are in charge of those sports, that are passionate about it, that I guarantee you have already started thinking about it. Yesterday, when I reached out to 2 of them, they were like, oh my God, I've already thought about it. I'm so glad you called me. Yes, I'll answer it. I sent them a list of 11 questions. Like, here's some 11 questions I want you to start thinking about, and send them back to me. We're going to come up with a proposal, submit it to the principals. And at the very least, hopefully our North County Conference can play and play each other if other ones don't decide not to play, but at least we have a plan. And the last part that I'm seeing, Ira, before we move on, is summer camps. I don't know necessarily anything will be open in the summer. I've told my football coach to not plan on it. So what does your fall look like? And how can you get those kids safely ready to play if you start September 1st or October 1st or November? Like, what weeks do you need? So again, that's a different conversation. But let's move on just in the means of time. Ira, I do think that ideas for the sport return should be on the agenda next week. Maybe you and I can do our own little conversation about this sometime this week and blast it out. I do think there's a lot of information there that we could help a lot of people with. The next part is the NCAA webinar. That was on Tuesday. Those of you, if any of you were in that, they had to cancel it. They had a Zoom hacker, so they had to cancel that. Yes, I will share the 11 questions I discussed with coaches when I send you guys the recap of this. I'll send that out as well. And then the last thing, Ira, on our agenda is, connecting with your athletes, social media challenges, having them do pictures. I know that for me, I asked all my coaches to have my players send me pictures of them in uniform. And I just started posting, blasting it out, and kids were liking it, and Instagram blew up just because they want something to look at that's positive. So what's your thought on that, Ira?
I think you need to connect. Right now, the best thing we can do is over communicate. I'm doing once a week video for the student athletes and families, and just trying to really communicate with them on various different things, whether it's different tips they should be doing, why quarantine, or recruiting stuff, or other things that student athletes should be doing at this time. But I think the communication piece is very important for you. And people want to hear from you. I mean, families are sitting at home, student athletes are sitting at home, coaches are sitting at home. They want to hear from you. I mean, there's not a lot going on, so they want to hear from their leader, and you're their leader of things to be thinking about, things to be doing. Even if you don't have a lot of information, just hearing from you is very important. And sometimes you can send out an email. I think that's good. But sometimes you may need to do a Zoom meeting or other things. Be creative and try to really communicate with your constituents. Now is the best time to do that because everybody's a captive audience. So make sure you're doing that. We're doing our senior awards next week virtually, and we're looking forward to those awards. I mean, we got a whole big program put together. We're gonna have coaches in there, student athletes in there, special guests. It's gonna be great. But again, it's important for them to feel and know that, hey, you know what, we couldn't do our senior awards the way we want to do them in person, but we're still gonna have a great award ceremony for you. So you just want to continue to communicate, and like I said earlier, over communicate right now as an athletic leader.
So, I think we should probably end it here. I do think there's a lot of discussions and more things that we can have, bringing up, especially the planning for the fall. Ira and you and I will speak about that. Maybe we can do something like that. I will tell all the ADs that are listening, please send us stuff. If you have a great idea, you have something you want us to talk about, you have a problem that you can't, work through or figure out, this is such an amazing group of people. You inspire me every time I get to see your faces on here and the questions that you ask. Please reach out. Ira and I don't know everything. We're just trying to get information that we do have to you. But we're all this together. Like I said before, we're strong because of the jobs we're in, but we're stronger together. And I say that, and I truly mean it. And, Ira, it's always a pleasure doing these with you. And so we'll get more information out to everybody. I'll send you those 11 questions that I sent to the people in charge of the sports around here. And anything from you, Ira?
Yeah, just we're looking forward to next week. We'll have an amazing guest. You don't want to miss it. It's going to be an exciting week next week. Share this out. Still keep getting ADs who missed this call, who want to be on it. So please share on social media and let people know we're here. We want to continue to help people. All right. Thank you. Have a great day, everyone.
All right. Thank you.